Hi everyone, I'm Jamieson Bunn, the Communications Program Manager for the City of Petaluma and the host of One Petaluma, your local government podcast. We're recording this podcast on Wednesday, October 30th, and the election is less than a week away. But don't worry, if you're feeling overwhelmed by politics, know that we feel that way sometimes too. In fact, we wanted to use this episode to get away from the division we're seeing in the news and online and get back to the heart of our work. We're going to do our best to release this before next week's election. If we don't quite make it, we hope it will still feel relevant. We're guessing if you're someone who listens to your local government's podcast, you're pretty aware of the election news from political races at every level. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. Because city government keeps going, no matter what happens in any given November. Your trash will keep getting picked up, the water will still flow out of your faucet. Petaluma's city charter and its general plan will continue to inform our laws and guide decisions that are made, not just today, but well into the future. And city staff will continue to do our jobs to provide you with all the benefits of a full-service city. Why? Let me tell you about my first day on the job. I, name, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States, the Charter of the City of Petaluma, and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States, the Charter of the City of Petaluma, and the Constitution of the State of California, that I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter. All staff at the City of Petaluma and every city in the state of California has to swear a version of this oath as part of their orientation on the first day on the job. It's required as part of the process that designates us as disaster service workers, which means we're required to come to work in the event of a big emergency or a disaster that affects the community. This responsibility is one of the most crucial aspects of our jobs. No elected official can change this requirement of city staff. It's baked into state law. Because the safety of our community and the basic idea that government staff should serve our residents is bigger than politics. Individually, we might disagree about which street should have bike lanes going through town. We might even get angry about those disagreements. But if the big earthquake hits, all of those debates will go out the window. If there's one thing I believe to be true about Petaluma, it's that in a big emergency, bikers and drivers will forget those differences long enough to work together to help our neighbors, make sure that everyone has access to the food, water, and shelter that they need, and put in the hard work to rebuild and recover. And city staff, from our road crews to laptop warriors like me, will be making sure that your city government keeps running no matter what. When I was doing research for this podcast, I realized it had been a while since I'd read the Constitution that I swore to uphold and defend. If it's been a while for you too, I'm going to use the election season as an excuse to read out the first paragraph. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. This paragraph sets the stage for our whole American theory of government, which is that government exists to serve, benefit, and protect all of us. And to serve in local government is to see the impact of that service every day, on our neighbors, our friends, our kids, and our families. So for this episode of our One Petaluma podcast, I brought a few of the folks whose jobs it is to make sure we're serving the public to the best of our abilities every day. I am delighted to be joined by Peggy Flynn, our city manager, Eric Danley, our city attorney, Brian Miller, chief of police, Drew Halter, director of Parks and Recreation, and Brian Cochran, assistant city manager. Thanks for being here, everyone.
Good morning.
Thanks for having us.
Good to see you.
All right. Can I have you go around the studio and introduce yourselves? State your role and how long you have worked for the city of Petaluma. Brian, you want to start?
Sure. Good morning. Brian Miller. I'm your police chief, and I've been here about 20 years.
Good morning. I'm Peggy Flynn. I have the honor and privilege of serving as your city manager for the last 5.5 years and serving as the city manager of the city I live in.
Good morning. I'm Eric Danley, the city attorney. I've been serving in that role for the city since December of 2005.
Good morning. Drew Halter, Director of Parks and Recreation. I have been with the city since 2013, so that's 11 years.
Hi, everybody. Brian Cochran, Assistant City Manager, and I've worked for Petaluma for the past 5 years.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. Our first question is, what is special to you about working in local government? And can you speak to the privileges and advantages of working in a city like Petaluma?
Well, I guess I always kind of geek out on local government since I was a journalism student back at San Jose State. And I would say that what excites me about local government is our responsiveness. This is the only branch of government that can immediately address immediate in government terms. Sometimes it doesn't seem as immediate on the ground, but just that we are able to be responsive to our community's needs fairly quickly and also hyper-focused on achieving some really creative results.
That's a great question, Jamieson. For me, one of the things I love the most is how eminently rewarding, how much it feels good to do public service at the local government level. And that's good because it's not for people who need a lot of outside affirmation for what they're doing, although we get our share. But what drives that for me is you addressed it in your intro, and Peggy a little bit too. Petaluma is a full-service city, and that means we provide the full range of services that our community members need. And there's no real partisanship about that. And so one of the things I love about public service in municipal government is there's no politics about whether the water is clean or whether your sewer treatment plant is operating correctly or police and fire are there when you need them and operating constitutionally. So it's really kind of it feels like a pure public service delivery focus, and that just feels really great. The results of us doing a great job are tangible. We get to see how much it matters to do our best work because it can have really lasting effects. Hopefully does. For me, that inspires me to keep doing the work every day.
Nice.
I think for me, as not only a city employee, but as a community member, I see the daily work and the impacts of it directly. I experience the improvements. I see my children and my family navigating those changes, and we also get to experience the evolution and see the transition of change actively occurring. It's not like when you return to a location after being away for years and you're like, wow, it looks a lot differently. Like, you're seeing the change in real time and feeling those improvements and the impacts and having the opportunity to have the input in those decision-making processes. And I think the other component of the question, we talked about what are some of the advantages of working in the city of this size. And for me, it's just the right size. Yes. It's not too big. It's not too small. It's a full service city. We have every amenity and opportunity that not every city has the privilege of. And it's small enough yet still where people know me as your police chief, but they also know me as the person, as your neighbor, as the volunteer and the coach, and know each other on that first name basis. So you get the benefits of both extremities.
Well said, Chief.
Yeah, I'm always struck by sometimes, if maybe you're not happy with your city or your local government, that you sort of refer to it as the city. And yes, I'm using air quotes when I say the city. Yet the reality is there are real people behind all the services. And I'm always struck by, whether it's Chief Miller's police department or Drew's Parks and Rec department, they're providing real services on the ground to you, our residents, every day, whether it's childcare at the community center, summer camps, making contact with folks on the street. And that's the true essence of local government. We are there for you every day, and we're making contact with you and providing the services at a hyper-local level.
24/7.
24/7.
Yeah, and I love this question, Jamieson, and a couple of words stand out. One is that kind of pure community service, as Eric said, and also that ability, to serve within your community. the common thread, through government is always, public service. But what's so special about the local government in Petaluma? It's the ability, and it's the privilege and responsibility to be able to serve your neighbors, being able to make an impact in the folks' lives that you then can be a part of. And it's also, a city this size, there's a talent and expertise among, not just in this room, but peers where we're not so deep, our bench is not so deep where you've got multiple people backing each other up, but that you have to be really agile and resilient and develop skills and expertise to where, we've got a civil engineer that also has a background in active transportation or may have to help and pitch it when you erect a structure for a care and shelter. We have developed this kind of broad base of expertise where we know, regardless of the issue, we can deliver for our community because the expertise is within the group. So powerful.
Nice. We talk a lot about public feedback, wanting to engage the community, get people on board with what we're doing, but also seek their ideas. But I'd love to hear your thoughts about what role public feedback can play in our decision-making process, and how we build coalitions that serve the community.
That's such a great question, Jamieson. I always say government for the people, by the people, because we exist to serve the community and not the other way around. And I would just say that every time we get feedback, even if it's somebody who's having a bad day and they just need to vent, there's always a gem in everything that we hear from our community. And the team recognizes that. We may have to forego some of the anger and then just really delve into, what's that issue, and then balancing those interests. What one person thinks is an issue, somebody may be embracing as an amenity in the neighborhood. And so what we have to do is take a step back and look at the greater good, also look at the different shades of compromise that we can come up with. And that's what I was talking about earlier about the creativity. We can do that at a local government level, and we could do it here in Petaluma because, to the chief's point, we do have so many different we own our own transit agency. We're able to pivot in a way that most cities our size can't, just because we are a true full-service city.
What I would add to that is, it's by design that local government in the U.S. constitutional framework is supposed to be the most responsive form of government, and we can't be that if we're not engaged with the community, because we're not hearing about the changing priorities, and they do change, and sometimes really rapidly. So for us to be able to be that responsive government, we need to be connected, both in terms of doing council priorities and also making sure our day-to-day operations are responsive to the community needs. The other thing that I think is important to that, and Jamieson, you alluded a little bit to some of the divisiveness we sometimes feel these days in this time of election season, is we need to stay connected to the community to contextualize what we're hearing from folks who may be community members, they may be members of advocacy groups, and the council and staff together need to make sure we're addressing the full community needs. Mm-hmm. And sometimes those sort of organized efforts are contextualized that way, so we're still responding to the full community needs and addressing those. Also, it sounds minor, but it's really not. We have a duty as a city to maintain the public spaces and facilities in a safe condition, and our best eyes and ears to help us do that are community members. And so we're actually legally obligated to pay attention to and address those concerns we hear from them. So that's another important reason why we have to really stay connected with our community members.
When you say contextualize the public feedback, does that mean we hear from certain citizens and or residents and advocacy groups, but you want to make sure we're understanding the whole picture and whose voice might not be at the table? Right.
It's both things. So something I try to remind colleagues and the council members sometimes is that the voices that we're hearing in the council meetings are not necessarily representative of the larger community. They may be, but they may not be. Mm-hmm. And also, there may be some significant voices on communities that we're not hearing from at all. Mm-hmm. And so we need to make efforts, as we've been doing of late with some of our, translation programs and things like that and other outreach to make sure we're trying to hear from all the voices.
That's our role. That's our mandate.
And I think we're getting to kind of the idea of consensus building, which for me, I feel like that's what we're doing almost on a daily basis. And, consensus building does not necessarily mean a decision is unanimous, right? But it does mean that the voices have been heard, the facts and the input has been considered, and a decision has been made. And most, if not everybody, can at least understand and respect a decision, even though they may not agree with it.
Right.
And that's something that I think we have to be cognizant of as a local government.
And keep working at. We need to keep demystifying government so people understand how those decisions are reached.
Exactly.
Because sometimes we have to do it in the moment. Other times we have a little bit more ramp up time, but just demystifying it because there are a ton of processes and procedures and requirements on us that we have to adhere to.
Yeah. Are there any specific examples from your experience here in Petaluma where community feedback was either surprising and took us in a direction that we hadn't anticipated, or that changed the trajectory of a project from what you originally thought?
Yeah, I'd like to share one example, and I think it just puts into perspective the overarching real value and necessity of the impact we have is it allows us to really kind of check some of our assumptions going into either a project or an initiative. And so being able to be really open and engaging with seeking authentic feedback on a project early and often, and being vulnerable for that feedback and being able to communicate what you're going to do with it is so important. Mm-hmm. One project that really, exemplified this was the skate park redesign. This was a project that Petaluma has the fourth oldest skate park in the state. We're very proud of our 14,000 square foot vintage park.
Spleen Buster.
Yeah, it's got some names. But, we went in. This was one of the growing sports during the pandemic early on. We had a lot of conflicting uses out there because we had a lot of different folks from scooters to biking to skaters all using a smaller space. I know it was impacting the chief and public safety and everyone down the line. So we went in with the assumption that we were going to invest in revitalizing that skate park. What things could we do to modify it and bring it up to kind of today's needs? And through that authentic kind of engagement process, we really let the user groups and those impacted kind of tell us what's most important about the values that they hold at the park, where should we go, and that project really morphed from a redesign of an existing park to let's look 25, 40 years down the road. What's the future of the sport? What's the future of the city? And let's find locations that's really going to serve us the best. Mm-hmm. So again, that project morphed from a redesign to an alternate site, a new park, and now we're breaking ground next summer on Petaluma's second full skate park. And it was the community engagement that really drove that project, not the city telling the community what was best for them.
Nice.
And I've got a little bit of a different answer because the police department gets plenty of feedback.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because for us, the decision-making process, 99% of the time, we don't ask the community necessarily for their input in that because we're actively involved in an incident and we're making decisions on their behalf, following the Constitution, following law, following just general reasonableness and being appropriate and empathetic in our response. But I think that we often look for dialogue and coming to a common ground of understanding of why we're doing what we do, how we serve, and efforts of trust building so that when there's questions about the decision-making process or why decisions were made, we can start from a place of mutual understanding, of having a relationship. And so we talk often with the community and within our own staff about building relationships with each other, building relationships within the community, building partnerships and coalitions, because we know that, especially in policing, when we do our best to protect the vulnerable from harm, it's often the decision is a decision that results in compromise, where many parties are not completely satisfied, and we feel that sometimes when we're most effective, that compromise is actually the sweet spot of a decision, where every party has to give a little bit, but it takes trust, it takes confidence, and we hope that the community feels that. And when they do feel that, we hear feedback, we hear meaningful dialogue, we hear reporting to us, we have people bringing concerns forward before things escalate into bigger issues. And like Drew, I have a similar experience where members of our youth who we don't generally hear from came to council in 2020 and 2021 advocating for assistance in mobile health. And we were looking at some of these alternative models of policing and responding to people in crisis in our community and trying to bring something better to this area. And they advocated for a program, and the community listened, we listened, and they were right. And we continue to be a leader and have the full 24/7 mobile crisis intervention team, the SAFE team here locally. It was the first in the county. It was the first in the state. It's the first on a school campus. And it's because we listened and took that time, and because community members brought forward an idea and there was the will behind it. And it's just such an invaluable program that I couldn't imagine not having at this point in time.
Mm-hmm.
Another really lovely example, I think, is the public input and outreach program that Peggy came up with.
Fairgrounds Advisory Panel. We're the first.
But the organization.
Oh, Healthy Democracy.
Healthy Democracy, thanks. To reach out to community members that had not been involved in community decision making or participating.
Didn't have the privilege to be able to sit at a council meeting or serve on a committee or commission because they were working. So working with the nonprofit Healthy Democracy to talk about one of the most amazing gems in our city, the fairgrounds, and assembling 36 panelists and paying them hourly for their wisdom and their input, and not to usurp our already robust engagement process,
right,
but to
supplement.
round it out, because as you mentioned earlier, Eric, and the team mentioned earlier, it's our duty, it's our mandate to make sure that all voices are heard, and we really try to make that happen.
It wasn't hard to know that 55-acre property in the heart of the city, I think easily a $50 million property, the citizens' most valuable piece of real estate, had a lot of underutilized potential that could do more than just offer an annual fair. But what really activated the thinking about that and the bringing of new uses and informed the council's direction to us about how to proceed with managing that property and developing that property on behalf of the community was all the public input we got. And as Peggy said, it was bolstered by the Healthy Democracy process, but it was all channels wide open, and we heard from so many folks, and it was really inspiring and beautiful and sort of consistent with the things we've been talking about, to see how community members started to envision what could be happening there and seeing themselves and their families and their loved ones doing things there, and that's still guiding our work there. So we really couldn't be in this place without a real commitment to an implementation of community connection.
Right. And to that point, Peggy, you were just at a conference, was that right, where you got to speak about the fairgrounds, and there was the context of there were 4, I think, amazing community engagement projects across the world that were spoken about. And can you remind me which ones they were?
Paris, Brussels, Canada, I forgot which province in Canada, and Petaluma.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's right in.
The big 4.
Right. Yeah. What I like about that too is I read the vision statements that the groups came up with, and it sounds like there were months of healthy debate and probably some disagreements, but in the end, most of the panelists agreed on some major points and it's significant numbers that we're now able to sort of move forward on. And when we go into the master planning process, we've got pretty clear direction from the community.
We are so guided by those principles that the panel, and the work that the panel did was reinforced by our engagement process. So it wasn't that we heard anything different. It was just an ability to hear the voices that don't typically come to a city workshop, a council meeting, that don't even realize that they have a voice. And that's why this was so essential, because this is the people's property.
And if you have any doubt about whether the council's listening, I mean, if you look at the resolution the council adopted, there was a complete, with additions, but a complete implementation of the healthy democracy process recommendations and other public comments we got. That became our guidance. So it's a really good example of how that listening is critical to get the great results the community can embrace, and that it really does inform the decision making.
And the trust. I think that's, if we do nothing else, right, that's our foundation, is public trust. We hold that so sacred. So when you talk about the value of public input into that decision making, you can't have that public trust without it. And so in a property, in a stakeholder involvement as big as the fairgrounds, that was so crucial and on display every day. Is we are going to take the community input every step along the way, and then at the end you can really celebrate the process that was used to get to where we are.
That's right, Drew. It's an accountability thing, because
Absolutely.
when you have that kind of process and you have that kind of commitment, the public's in a position to serve the oversight function they're supposed to be able to, and that's another reason that's another feature that keeps local government responsive is, wait a minute, you committed to doing this and it seems like you're drifting. What about those commitments? And that's really key, because it helps us keep our focus.
Nice. Are we going to do any other type of community panel in the future that's similar to that?
I would love to do that for our charter amendments. That would be an amazing, I'm going to use Eric's crucible of experimentation, but I was just talking to Bend, Oregon, and they're going to be doing a huge panel on some of their land use decisions. And so we're starting to see it. Karen Bass just set up, I think, a permanent panel, a community member panel.
Oh, wow.
So we're seeing it all across the United States now, because we've been going out and kind of sharing our experience, and would love to do it for the big things that we are gonna have to wrap our arms around, but also some of the smaller things, council compensation, which will also be a part of our charter amendments. But those community character conversations, I think, are really important for our community to weigh in on.
Well, to the point about the charter amendments, just so that everyone at home has some context, can you remind me when our charter was last updated and what that might look like in the future if we need to update that?
It was a long time ago. It was before I started serving, early 90s. Do you remember?
Predates me for sure.
So a long time ago, and,
Right.
and we have unfortunately, I mean, there's some great features of our charter, but modern charters are more succinct, because a charter is a document of limitation. It's actually voter-imposed limits on the city council's authority. It gives us the ability to regulate differently from the state on municipal affairs. So that's one of the reasons why we can be a great place for governmental experimentation and innovation.
Home rule versus having the state
Right.
dictate to us.
Right.
I think that's the benefit of our charter. And while it's antiquated, it not only gives us the home rule, but it also gives us some flexibilities in being able to pivot as local government. So we want to just make sure that it's up to date, and that our residents get to look at it and feel it and understand what we're governed by, because it is a benefit being a charter city versus a general law city.
To that point, we when we were planning this podcast, we were sort of all brainstorming about what's so amazing about Petaluma and local government. And Eric at the time brought up that local government is intended to be the crucible of experimentation, that particular phrase.
That's
and
an Ericism.
I wrote it down because I loved it. I was like, oh, that's such a beautiful way of expressing it. And that local government, you said, was intended to be the place where we try new things, and that the state and federal government should be paying attention to what we're doing to make policies that affect everyone and can improve everyone's lives. So could we talk a little bit about that and how we're implementing that in Petaluma?
Sure.
Well, I think one thing that Peggy says all the time is that we've got to fail fast and learn from that. And I really take that to heart every day. I think that's something that we do pretty well in Petaluma in terms of knowing that our community expects us to innovate. And they're not expecting us to be ultra risk averse and afraid of doing what's right. And I think that's something we've been able to implement in a wide variety of ways, and we do it kind of on a daily basis. We never quite know what's going to be coming at us, right, when we walk into work in the morning. And one of the agilities or the abilities that we have is to kind of turn on a dime. And that's something that it makes the work challenging. It also makes it fun, and it makes it exciting in that we're able to be super responsive to the community when we may not have a prescribed solution. We may be doing something for the first time, but through being true to the community and working through issues and problems, we can actually come to a great solution that is part of that experimentation process that we have the ability to do on a local level.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I can take credit for that phrase. I think it was the founders. It also might have been. I mean, one of the neat things, I'm speaking of geeking out about government, I mean, when the country was being founded, one of the things that sort of both excited and terrified some of the European political theorists about our republics and the structure, people like Montesquieu and Mill, was that we were actually planning for genuine local government decision-making on significant governmental decisions. And they thought that was both exciting and terrifying. They were worried that local factionalism, they called it, like we sometimes see, and that's members of the community, pitting their interests against each other instead of finding compromises. They thought that was a danger that would need to be protected against, but they were fascinated by this idea of things like home rule and local governments making real decisions. And because the issue is, it can be easier to try out solutions at the local level because they're smaller, but local solutions can be national solutions. There's some things I think that we are playing some leadership roles or at the forefront in terms of working out solutions, like civilian oversight of our excellent policing program and commitment to constitutional policing. It's our full cycle of programs to address shelterlessness and provide services and also keep the public's property and public spaces safe and usable for everybody. That's a whole sort of a circuit of local government commitments that need to be invested in, as we've learned. And I think we're starting to see some case law developments nationally. They're starting to recognize some of that.
Well, I would say, Eric, I want to underscore what you just said, because Petaluma, once when I joined the city in 2019, and I don't know how much of our community knows this, but we were going to file bankruptcy as a city in 2021, and we had to believe in ourselves like the community believed in us and get back to fiscal sustainability so we could lead. And we have we've been able to leverage Measure U, which our voters passed in 2020 on the 1 cent sales tax. We were able to, as a full service city, then start to leverage that money that was coming into our general fund and lead. And now we're seeing our county partners, our state partners, and even at the federal level, they're starting to recognize that Petaluma is leading, and we are bringing in funding for our community on exactly all those initiatives that you mentioned, Eric, whether it's homelessness, whether it's policing, whether it's our SAFE team, whether it's our fairgrounds. That's the importance of the city recognizing what the community's needs are and then leading, and what, to your point, Brian, is taking those opportunities and not being risk adverse, and saying we're going to give it our best, which I believe this team does every day. And yes, are we human, and do we fail because we don't know the entire solution, but we're trying to solve it because everyone on this team, all 400 employees of the city of Petaluma, are uber committed to the community, and we look for those solutions every single day.
Taking a little bit different spin on this too, I think we attract and retain talent within our staff for people that are drawn to a city with the culture that Petaluma has for being willing to pilot and be progressive and experiment. And so while the structure of local government's intended for that, I think we can look to a lot of other models where they're just totally comfortable being in a fixed mindset and not growth focused on trying things differently, willing to have these falling forward moments. I look at my path to even coming here, and my college's motto was learn by doing. And now I'm at Petaluma, where we talk about yes and how do we strategize implementation of things. And in the police department, we talk about this concept of perpetual continuous improvement and one by one policing, of doing one more thing or being better than the day before, and compounding that momentum. And so conceptually, I just feel like the people that are here that Drew mentioned are actually physically doing the work. And speaking as a director, a working director, we are doing the work and our staff is diligently doing the work, but we're doing and adapting things and trying things, and our community supports us in piloting those things and advocates for that. And I think it's just, the people that are here are well intended, but also have that kind of hardwiring to want to do exactly what we're being asked to do, which I find super rewarding. And that's the piece that's always kept me here, that probably drew me here in the first place, and really empowers me to feel like I can do and innovate and empower my staff that's going to be the future leaders to carry the torch forward for us to bring even better ideas forward tomorrow.
And before we move on too, I just wanted to, I hear that word pilot, right? And it's one that we kind of toss around, which has just become synonymous with our vernacular, right? It's another governmental term that we kind of toss around. That's not always been the case. We weren't able to really believe in ourselves, right? Like our city manager, Peggy, was just saying, there was a paradigm shift there, where instead of going the route of, a status quo or a bankruptcy situation, we really did double down, and the community believed in itself and believed in us. And now what we're seeing, right, is these ability to pilot programs, to experiment, to quick build things. And now those terms have become synonymous with the culture that we're creating, because the community's there with us. We're communicating what our intentions are. We're being accountable for delivering on some of it and saying, we learned, it worked, it didn't. And then you take these big complex issues like homelessness and our unhoused and mental health, and now the city of Petaluma is demonstrating for our regional partners and our country pilots that work, or pilots that work in these situations, and that's super powerful.
The flip side of a lot of pilot programs, and a city being as agile and ambitious as ours, is that also we kind of have an internal joke about public service in Petaluma as doing everything everywhere all at once. And we are starting, we've been able to up staff from the pre-Measure U levels in most of our departments, but we're still a pretty lean team. We're a busy team. And so I'd love to talk a little bit too about how we reconcile the competing responsibilities to serve the public at the best level that we can, with council's set priorities and the other services that we still need to be providing on any given day.
Well, I think one thing that we do really well at leveraging in Petaluma is just the awe-inspiring depth and breadth of the level of staff expertise that we have. As we've mentioned maybe a time or two, as a very full-service city, we have a lot to offer our residents and our businesses. And what we're able to do is tap into those various areas of expertise, whether it is transit or our airport or our water and wastewater treatment facility, our police and fire department, which, by the way, also offers full paramedic service. So there are so many different services that we offer, and within those departments, we have true experts in their field in all of those areas. And so no matter what the problem is, we can typically tap into existing city resources and staff members to at least start the solution to a problem, and then also reach out to our local and regional partners and other jurisdictions to get those additional ideas to help support us. So I think that's a asset that Petaluma has that we can really leverage for our residents.
Yeah.
And on the flip side of that is also, I call it people-powered Petaluma, because our community, just as much as our staff have all this depth and breadth of experience and expertise, our community always blows me away, whether it's our awesome nonprofit network or it's just our residents who have expertise in solar energy, or they're leading the way in a variety of fields. And that's what we discover as we reach out to our community, is there's absolutely either one individual or a group of folks that can help us. We saw that with relief. We see that we are able to do so much more and transcend even the council's priorities, even though they're stated as, I think we've got, at this point we've got 35 top priorities, which I laugh because that's still a daunting amount.
Down to 35.
Yeah, we used to be at 257 just for the community's benefit. But it's feathering out those goals and kind of what is our end goal, right? We want a healthy, prosperous, inclusive community, that our community feels like they're part of this amazing thing that we call local government. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we know we're successful when people trust us to do the right thing. And that, I believe, is our mandate, and that is why we work so very, very hard to pursue that trust every day.
That's a really important reminder, Peggy. Petaluma has an unusual number of commissions and committees for a city its size.
Yes.
And I think the reason why is we have an unusual amount of both expertise and willingness to invest it in the community. And I should note that all of our commissioners and committee members receive zero compensation whatsoever for their volunteer efforts, but it's really a significant asset for us, as is our amazing network of nonprofit service providers. My other related joke to this question is the metaphor of driving the car while fixing the car, only it really feels more like redesigning the car while racing the car. I feel like that's what we do. And for me, it's just, and I think for all of us, but it's constant prioritization and reprioritization. And I think it's probably true for all of us. It's certainly true for our legal team, that literally our priorities change from day to day to implement the council's overall priorities
Within
and also
the day.
fulfill our duties.
Within the day.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
we could have an emergency drop, and we saw that. We had, I think, my first 2.5 years, we had 5 declared emergencies. And so you've got your list of things that, you leave the office on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, and then you come in on Monday morning, and those are all pushed down because you're dealing with, and public safety deals with that every moment of the day, but all of our departments do. People don't realize when there's a water break, when there's significant legal issue, we have to pivot and prioritize within the moment to make sure that our community is getting what it needs at that moment.
Right.
And still keeping our eye on the prize for making sure that we're moving forward as a city.
And I think it's exciting because sometimes those things that we never ever expected end up being some of the coolest, most innovative and exciting programs. So, sometimes we don't go into a particular issue even knowing that it's an issue or that we need to create a solution. But because we are reacting on the fly sometimes and day to day, some of our really innovative and creative things that we've been able to offer have come out of those unexpected type situations.
Nice.
Right. It's not just emergencies and responding to those. It's being open to the opportunities. That's just as important.
I think the other thing, though, that we often overlook, and we are so busy, one of the things that we forget to pause and reflect on is just the volume of work. And so I appreciated Peggy and others talking about the operational side of our staff have been out there through at least the last 5 years, an abundance of uncertain times, of pandemics, of crisis, of emergencies. I felt like for 5 years straight we were in a declared emergency. I joke that I remember sending out a tsunami warning during one of our flooding rain high king tide events that I was like, here, really, we're doing this? But
while rebuilding the city. I just want to remind everybody we were rebuilding the city at the same time.
And so, I think part of the priorities that I want to say is the most important priority is maintaining essential services, that people are here, that we have staff trained to repair the things, to keep the lights on, to move the city forward, to ensuring the safety of our community. And we have a vibrant community because of the standards and those priorities and that minimum expectation of what we give back and provide on a daily basis. And then on top of that, we're pushing these initiatives and projects forward. And when we take that moment and we look, like, we have gone leap years in the last few years and since Measure U, and there's just this constant evolution of change and growth and kind of a reawakening of a lot of things that for years I think we hope to have gotten to. And I'm really excited about, we're going through local hazard planning, general plan. I think those will even give us, as we have a litany of goals and priorities, but it'll give us that visionary philosophy and the roadmap to only help us better inform where we want each of our departments and where we want the city to be going and navigating to. And that comes back to that earlier question about that community input. The community, I think I was hearing from city staff the other day on one project, they had over 2,000 responses on different topics that are helping us inform where we're going and what the city wants us to be as a community. Mm-hmm. And I'm really excited to help navigate and lead towards those goals.
One point that you raised that I think is especially important is the consistent high quality delivery of the day-to-day services that everyone expects, rightly so, because we don't have the luxury of pausing in that to innovate. We have to continue our commitment to do that at the highest level we can while innovating.
When I love this question too, because it's every hour, it's every day, certainly every in between council meetings, which is the show, right? But when I welcome new members of the team into the department or the organization, and you try to help our folks and peers, really kind of start to develop the muscle, which is how do you reconcile with these competing priorities, and you kind of get that look. Wow, we're doing a lot. Every day is where do I go? And I think I'm going to use a term Peggy uses often, where you're trying to find that North Star where it is, and we have some tools now with our council goals and priorities, which we are regularly kind of updating and checking in. But you've also got much more alignment with our values as a city, as an organization. And so, understanding where those are and knowing that, you're always checking in on your highlighted priorities, but, that opportunity that's right in front of you, hey, good news, team, we got the grant, tough news, team, right? We got the grant, so now we got to do it. So what do you do, right? You're trying to align that with, your values, and that's just like a good lens for us as an organization and as a community to just make sure, if we do nothing else, just making sure that we're following through on the projects initiatives that really highlight those values, and giving each other grace. So that's us that we ask for often, but it's our staff that are learning or growing and retaining, and it's the community that really writes you that email with the all caps. It's taking a moment to understand we're not the only ones going through these hectic days and times. So allowing a little bit of cool down period to understand the issues and then carry out the mission. And I learned something, Chief, when you said, the tsunami warning. There was there's an aha moment. I think it was 2021 where I learned the new term, concurrent disasters. And that was something that wasn't in the playgroup book. Never want to hear that again. But how do you deal with that? You look back, nope, don't have a chapter on concurrent disasters. You got this pandemic and you've got 2 buses full of, aging adults coming over that you need to shelter collectively. So scary moments, but you develop those kind of North Star, those values, and then you're building that collaborative spirit among your team to handle whatever the issue is in front of you.
As you heard in this episode, we here at the City of Petaluma love this place, its people, and work hard every day to serve you. And we'll keep serving you no matter what the future brings, in order to form a more perfect community, maintain justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the community's defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Next episode, we'll be talking about the updates that have been happening all year on our Petaluma Fairgrounds and find out what's coming next for the property and the community in 2025. Until then, thank you to Peggy Flynn, Eric Danley, Brian Miller, Brian Cochran, and Drew Halter for sharing your work with us. Thank you to Rob Tomaszewski and Brandon Serrano of Petaluma Community Access Radio for recording and editing this episode. And most of all, thank you for listening. We're grateful for your time and for your love of Petaluma. Have a question you'd like answered? Email us at onepetaluma@cityofpetaluma.org. We may feature your questions in a future episode. In the meantime, don't forget to follow us on social media or sign up for our bi-weekly emails. Just visit cityofpetaluma.org/subscribe. Thanks again, Petaluma, and have a great day.